discussing Operable Unit 7 at the former IBM Endicott site. That's the only unit of the site, portion of the site that we'll be talking about this evening. We'll be talking about the proposed remedial action plan.
Excuse me, can you hold the mic closer?
Well, yes, you're welcome to hold that.
Yeah, can you hold it?
I talked with my hand.
Oh, it's just for you guys? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're welcome to hold it.
You can also hold it, yeah, but can't you just hold it in your hand too? You can take it off the stand.
If it's not annoying.
My name is Jess LaClair. I'm the project manager for the Department of Environmental Conservation, and later you'll be hearing from Julia Kenney, who's the project manager for the Health Department. Tonight we're going to be talking about brief remedial history of the OU7, the results from the latest shutdown test of extraction well 154R, the exposure pathways, the different remedial alternatives, and the department's proposed remedial alternative. This is just an overview of the site. We have areas OU1 and 2, which is the red and the orange. That's the main facility, which we have not selected remedy for yet. The gray area is OU3, which is the off-site portion of the plume. The yellow is OU4, which is the ideal cleaner site. OU5 in the upper corner is building 57. And then tonight we're going to be talking about the purple area, which is the OU7 in the northwest area. Just to point out a couple of things for the OU7 site. We have in the upper portion of the screen, you can see where there's soil excavation. And then the southern portion of OU7 was a former lagoon. And in the middle of the site, it's a little difficult, it's the red star, that was extraction well 218. And in the southern portion of the site is extraction well 154R. Some of the things that have already taken place. This is, again, specific to the OU7 area. Groundwater extraction began in 1984 with the installation of extraction well 154. And then also in 1984, there was a large soil removal where they removed 780 tons of contaminated soil in the northern portion by the Clark Street area. In 1988, the surface impoundment was clean closed. In 1994, they installed another extraction well in the northern portion of the site. In 2006, extraction well 154 was replaced. In 2007, IBM built a separate groundwater treatment facility to handle the waters from the 2 extraction wells in OU7. And they did the first shutdown of extraction well 218 in 2012. And then most recently, we did the shutdown test of extraction well 254R in 2014. This is a slide that just shows what the groundwater contour map looked prior to the shutdown of extraction well 154R. You can see that the groundwater flows to the southwest and is captured in that extraction well. And then 3 years after the shutdown test, again, the groundwater just flows to the southwest.
You want to point out the impact of the other one? The one east.
That's the recovered wells in OU3.
That's the point to make.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So the extraction well is in the east side.
Before Jess does that, my name is Kevin Farrar. I work in the central office in Albany with Jess. The point I was just asking Jess to make was that you can see where, although on the western portion of the site the groundwater is returned to its natural flow, on the east side where OU3 is, there's still capture associated with the rest of the groundwater pump system for OU3. But it's not related to what we're talking about tonight.
This is the concentration, shows the concentration for the extraction well 154R over the last 30 years.
Excuse me, can you please go back to the previous slide and somebody please walk up on the stage and explain what's going on with those arrows and what's going on with the flow? Because I think this is an important slide.
Absolutely. North is up the stream, okay? The arrows in the direction of groundwater flow. This is after the shutdown of the well. You can see that for the OU3 plumes right here, the westernmost of the recovery wells in OU3 is here. So you can see that this dot actually shows that this is being captured by this recovery well. This is OU3. OU7 that we're talking about tonight is this part of the well.
What's that yellow area that says dry? What does that mean?
It's an area where the aquifers dewater.
Where what?
The aquifers dewater. There's not water there. maybe there's a rise. We can get out the specific maps and show you, it's just an area where there's not groundwater.
At a specific layer, you mean? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the overburden, correct? The first overburden.
All right.
It's just an area that's not saturated.
So what you're really concerned with about here is the stuff north of the railroad tracks? Is that what the line is? What's that
This part of the site, which is being managed by groundwater recovery down there. That's the subject of tonight's meeting.
Franklin's
This
to the
one
west.
piece of the problem.
All right, thanks.
Franklin to
The big OU3 plume is over here. Area OU1 and 2 will be off the page a little bit. Specifically, what we're talking about is this part of the old site and the groundwater that was being managed by wells over here.
Thank you.
These graphs just show the concentrations of the contaminants that were in extraction 154R. You can see back in 1984, the extraction or the concentrations dropped significantly since 2084, so the first 20 years, 2004. Then there's another 10 years, which is shown here, where the concentrations really haven't changed very much. They kind of flatlined. We did a shutdown test of extraction 154R. So the line you can see is where we shut it down. You'll see that the concentrations dropped off in extraction 154R.
This shutdown was when?
2014. So it's been a 3-year test to see what the levels of concentrations would do over the last 3 years.
Can you please explain what the dip was in 2016 and the rise after that?
Is that the flood?
You're talking about this?
Yes.
I don't know if there's any particular reason other than climatic effects. Wet year, dry year, cold year, warming. I don't know if there's any really much difference. If you look at concentrations are only, this is not a big difference. This is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 to 11. There's really not that much difference between 5 and 11.
Well, that's in logarithmic, this graph, isn't it?
Yeah, all right, I'm sorry, 5 to 20. There's not really that much difference between 5 and 20. I mean, there's nothing that happened at this site had a significant cause that dip.
So these are all concentrations of different substances that all tracked.
No, there are concentrations of 1, 2, 5 different substances in each well that tend to track together, yes. Which is another reason which would indicate to me it's climactic.
It's what?
Climactic,
Oh, okay.
wet year, dry year, that sort of thing.
Okay.
You know, a particularly rainy year would tend to, or a rainy period would dilute groundwater.
So you think
If it's
that's
dry period,
dilution?
would increase concentration of groundwater. I haven't looked for a relationship between concentration and climate because frankly, the relative differences are very small.
And what are the 5 things you're testing for?
It says 1,1 TCA, 1,1 DCA, 1,1 DCE, that's trichloroethane, dichloroethane, dichloroethene, 3-on-112, and 3-on-123.
Isn't it true some of those were from Endicott Johnson? Is it hard to differentiate?
There may be other sources to groundwater here besides IBM, yes, absolutely.
Rubber cement.
Yeah, the glue plant is not that far away. The old glue plant is not that far away.
This is a similar concentration graph to monitoring well 96. Again, you'll see the line in the middle for 2014 is where the shutdown happened and concentrations did increase. And we attribute that to the groundwater shifting because the extraction well was no longer operating. So the groundwater flows shifted to the west, which is our explanation for why the concentrations raised in monitoring well 96. These are just some of the concentration plume maps comparing 2006 with 2016 data. This map shows the 1,1 TC8 concentrations. You'll see the northern portion of both the OU is below the drinking water standard of 5. This is the concentration plumes of 1,1 DCA concentration map. And again, the higher concentration is around monitoring well 96 again. The other wells are near or approaching the drinking water standards. The contour maps for the PERC concentrations, OU7, the drinking water standard, all the wells are below the drinking water standards for PERC, and the concentrations to the southern portion of the site where the former Shapiro and Catronic site are have also decreased significantly in the last 10 years. TCE concentrations have decreased. There's just the one well that has drinking water slightly above the 5 part per billion for the drinking water standard. And the southern portion of the site is also now non-detect for TCE.
So when you say drinking water standards, it's just in relation to these 5 chemicals, the concentrations?
These are the ones that are on the map, but all the wells in that area that we've been sampling for the main list of contaminants of concern at the site are below the drinking water standard of 5, except for vinyl chloride.
You wouldn't want to drink that water though.
If it was of sufficient bacteriological quality, why not?
Yeah. It meets the drinking water standards for most of the wells.
Do those chemicals cause cancer?
Health department.
Hi, I'm Julia Kenney, I'm with the Health Department. TCE is a known carcinogen. PCE is known as a probable carcinogen. But you'll see after Jess speaks, the groundwater within OU7 is not used for drinking water purposes. The water you drink.
Intrusion that goes out of the ground.
Well, vapor intrusion is a different pathway. I can talk about that too. But right now for drinking water, the water you drink, it doesn't come from OU7.
It comes from the well, but we have that in our drinking water in Endicott.
A little bit, you have a small amount of TCE in the village well field?
Yeah, I know Mayor Colella, he said it was in the drinking water.
Yeah.
Okay. But the village, they test your water supply, and you can find all those results on the village's website for the drinking water.
Yeah, there's dichloromethane, dichlorethane.
Right. I can talk more about soil vapor intrusion as it pertains to to OU7. And if you have further questions, because I know that vapor intrusion has been a big issue with the other operable units, we can discuss that later.
Okay.
Jess, could you make available to us the graphs and the diagrams?
Actually, those are all in I specifically sent them to you, but they're all in the shutdown report.
We were asked
this one?
we were asked earlier, no. We were asked earlier if we could get the presentation available, we can do that too. If you want to see all the graphs in the presentation, we can send you the presentation. But as Jess has said, there's a long detailed report that has all of the detailed information. Is it in the?
It's in the repository at the library. Electronically, actually.
New York State right now is grappling with a serious problem with toxic algae in waterways and lakes and whatnot, ponds. Is that something that would not present itself here? Is this just a surface issue?
For the most part, that is Maureen Chuck from New York State Department of Health. For the most part, the algae blooms you're probably referring to are surface water concern and are being investigated throughout the state. So with public supplies in general. So
that's not anything.
That is not a concern.
DOH would.
Nope.
There's nowhere to test because you couldn't really test for it or wouldn't present itself in the soil, right?
Correct.
Or it had to be body water.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yep. So good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julia Kenney. I work for the New York State Department of Health in the Bureau of Environmental Exposure Investigation. The State Health Department provides assistance to the Department of Environmental Conservation during the investigation and cleanup of sites such as the one we're talking about tonight. We make sure that both the investigation and cleanup are done in a manner which protects the public and prevents exposures. Now, it's important to understand that a chemical can cause a health effect only if it comes in contact with or enters the body. This contact is also known as exposure. We can be exposed to or come into contact with chemicals in the following ways. Direct contact, physically touching the chemical. Ingestion, eating contaminated soil or drinking contaminated water. And lastly, inhalation, breathing in contaminated air or vapor. The bottom line is, if there's no exposure, there can be no health effect.
What about psychological?
In terms of,
People are stressed because they think they might be exposed. I think there's been some studies on that.
But that's not caused by the chemical.
It's not
caused by the
caused
situation.
I'm just saying there can be some health effects psychologically. There's been studies on that.
I'm not aware of that, so I don't want to speak to it. But let's,
Yeah, in the community, if there is a perception about exposure and health effects, we try to address those in whatever manner we can. So we don't dismiss what people are concerned about.
Or what the
we try to explain about the potential exposures and what we're dealing with. But certainly that is a potential concern or something that does occur in communities.
So let's look at the potential exposure pathways for OU7 and how they're being addressed. So as I said earlier, the groundwater at this site within OU7 is not used for drinking water purposes. The water you drink comes from a public water supply that is tested routinely and gets its water from the lower aquifer. Next, monitoring of groundwater will be conducted to make sure that the remedy is working. And lastly, a groundwater use restriction will be in place in OU7. Next, direct contact to soil. Confirmation sampling indicated that soil was not contaminated, so therefore actions were not needed to address exposures to soil. Lastly, breathing in contaminated air. As I spoke earlier, it's called soil vapor intrusion. It's the process by which a contaminated source, like a groundwater plume, those volatile organic chemicals within that plume like to get out of the water, and when they get out, they can get into overlying buildings or structures and impact the indoor air. Sampling was conducted at several buildings within OU7, and it was determined that no further action was needed to address exposures. So in conclusion, the investigations conducted have evaluated all exposure pathways and actions have been taken to minimize or prevent exposure. The proposed remedy will address any potential for future exposures. Therefore, we believe that the proposed remedy is protective of public health. So Jess is going to go into the remedial action objectives and the remedial alternatives, and then we will open it up for questions.
So when looking at OU7 specifically, our remedial objectives were to prevent ingestion of contaminated groundwater, prevent direct contact with the contaminated groundwater, and to restore the groundwater aquifer to the extent practical. To do this, we looked at 4 different alternatives for the site. In the Superfund, we always have to look at a no action alternative. Alternative 2 is a no further action with site management. Alternative 3 is a monitored natural attenuation. And alternative 4 was to turn back on the groundwater pump and treat system for OU7. You can see the associated cost. Alternative 4 had a significantly higher annual cost than alternative 3. And alternative 3 and 2 are similar, but I'll go into more detail about the monitored natural attenuation shortly. In the Superfund program, there are certain criteria that we look at when selecting a remedy. We didn't leave alternative 1 into the selection criteria because we didn't feel it would be protective of human health and the environment not to monitor. So we stopped looking at that one. Alternative 2, it would have been protective of human health and the environment. However, it didn't give us a chance to, if looking at the data, if we happen to see an increase, it wouldn't have given us the opportunity to go look at the other sources. So with the monitored natural attenuation remedy, It met all of our criteria. The short-term and long-term impacts were very similar to the groundwater extraction system because the system is already in place. It would just be a matter of going through and turning it back on. So the department's selected remedy, or proposed remedy, is monitoring natural attenuation for OU7. And with that, it would include having institutional controls, which would be, part of that is already the consent order that's in place for the entire site. But there would also be an easement put in place. There'd be a site management plan that incorporated a groundwater monitoring plan, as well as periodic reviews to look at the data to see if there's something else that had to be done. And we'd also have the remedial site optimization, which we could evaluate if further work needed to be done to find any other sources. So that's our selected remedy.
So to what do you attribute the success of this cleanup? Is it mostly all the tons of soil that was removed early on to get rid of most of the contaminants, and then the pump and treat after that?
Looking at the data, I would say that the 30 years of pump and treat in OU7 was what brought all the concentrations down significantly.
But the initial source control was probably a key action. If you look back 30 years ago, there was a significant amount of contamination from known release areas.
And you could do that in this OU7 because there weren't that many buildings. Is that the situation?
Yeah, the what was the source of how that was removed and what was the tank?
It was actually, the original soil removal of 780 tons was actually done before any buildings were put in. It was in the Clark Street campus. When IBM first bought it, they found contamination that was already there from previous operations, and they cleaned it up before they put any new buildings in that northern portion.
So that's it.
And then they closed the service and
Yeah, it probably would have been difficult to have the success that we've seen so far with the pump and treat without source control. It's hard to get concentrations down to standards without doing source control.
So that's the challenge in some of the other areas where ground zero is, where a lot of the chemicals are spilled. You can't get in there to dig them out. That's why that's going to take a little longer, I'm assuming.
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it from the other parts of the site. But in general, doing groundwater remedial work, source management is a key necessary element to successful remediation. And in this case, it was done
30 years.
Yeah, 30 years ago, back when I first started. A long time ago.
Frank?
Could you go back to the graph that you were showing the concentrations?
For the monitoring well or the...
Right.
Which one do you want to say?
The extraction well or the monitoring well?
The monitoring well. Okay. My concern is that you're going to sample at, I think, you didn't say this, but in the report it said you're going to sample at the 5-year and at the 10-year mark.
No. There'll be, the monitoring wells will be sampled on an annual basis as part of the overall site monitoring plan, and they'll be taking a look at the results and every 5 years specifically, in 10 years to make sure, to see what the numbers are actually doing.
But we're still going to, still sampling.
Yeah, they're still sampling, we're still looking at the numbers every year that they come in to see what's going on. It'll just be a more in-depth review.
Just, these were quarterly samples that are on this graph right now.
On that one, yes.
So
That was part of
we have a pretty good idea of the tempo of trend because they sampled every 3 months for 4 years to understand the trend. So now we think that the sample that's going to be proposed will be sufficient. We don't anticipate to be a significant change in trend, but we'll see.
Well, and those graphs look like it's kind of edging up a little until the last few.
There is, I would say, from there to there probably is another trend. But
Okay, and then could you
the key thing. Do you have the other graphs, Jess, up at the end of the presentation? Those graphs are kind of hard to see the big picture because it shrinks the middle of the graph. Look at this is the same graph, only the middle isn't shrunk.
Okay.
And that actually shows before the wells.
You see it in its context, and then shows a large scale graph. So it's actually on a normal number graph that will be a very steep decline.
But this well also shows 1980 before that first extraction well came on as well.
So you can see that the concentrations used to be over part per million. In some cases, over 10 part per million. And now we're talking concentrations that are 20 or 30 part per billion for a couple of constituents, and some of them are
I would say it's more than that, because I've heard this.
So you're absolutely correct when you look at that, just the last few years, maybe there's a slight upward trend, or we're going to look at that, and if that continues, then that's something that we would look at 5 years from now or 10 years from now and say, you know, do we need to take some further source from others?
Remind me if, because I forgot what you said earlier, are you doing a pump and treat now? Cut that out.
There's other portions of the site, the pump and treat system has remained on. For OU7, it's been off since 2014, because we wanted to see what would happen if we turned it off.
And then could you go to the cost slide, please? So the alternative 3, that includes the analytical cost, sampling and analytical costs?
Yes.
Okay. Besides that, what would be the other costs associated?
The different,
You got to pay somebody to go out and collect the samples.
Okay, collecting samples and analyzing them.
Yeah,
That's the whole cost.
Yeah, and then
Pretty much.
And then you would probably, if you get into the policy report, what you might see is that it's 12, 12, 12, 12, 25, because the 50 year, you're going to have to pay the engineer in the office to evaluate the data and write the report.
Okay, thank you.
Will somebody make sure that in case you do need to start treatment again and extraction from the ground, that this system will be maintained and be available so that it doesn't become a huge expense to get it turned back on again?
My understanding is IBM is offering to give it to us, that's one of the answer. The second response would be, this system was installed to manage the groundwater pollution, primarily associated with OU7, IBM's property into this part of the site. It may be, if there's future remedial work necessary, that where you pump treating for this big plume is not the right place. For example, if there's some other site source off-site that's getting in here and causing this problem, maybe we want to pump somewhere else. So I don't know that it would be worth a big expense to like mothball the plant, but I don't think there's any plan to, for example, abandon the recovery well, right? Where they're not going to pull up the well and run it out. The big cost of recovery wells is siting them and drilling. The pumps and stuff are not that expensive. As long as the well is still there, you can simply put a pump in it and turn it on.
Is this a requirement that that well still be available?
Not that I'm aware of, nor do I believe it's necessary.
I'm a little confused. So if whoever's running the site, be it Huron or their successor, if Huron folds or whatever, or they sell out, and they decide to pour concrete into this well, just to be spiteful and prevent...
Well, then they would be in violation of 375 and they would suffer significant consequences. That will be a significant change in use, which they would have to get the approval of the department.
Okay, so there is a requirement to make this...
Well, there's no specific requirement to maintain this well, but if someone engages in a behavior which is a significant change in use of the site, like concrete up a recovery well would be a significant change in use, the law requires that they get the prior approval.
Okay.
The tons of contaminated soil that were removed 30 years ago, you said it was? How many tons was it?
780.
780 tons, and that was pretty contaminated with chemicals? And
That was,
that's all been removed?
Yep, solvents and metals.
So where did that go? Do you guys know the history on that, where it was dumped?
I'd have to go back to the reports and figure out which landfill it went to.
It was with department oversight at the time.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, if 30 years, they might have thrown manifest out by now. We usually maintain records for 30 years. It would have been manifested out, I mean, the modern hazardous waste management laws were in place by then. So it would have been manifested and had to go to a permitted facility. I just don't know what the answer is.
It probably would have been CWM or FMC.
Yeah, the closest hazardous waste landfills that could receive any waste were probably those in Western New York.
Yes.
Like Jess says, FMC.
Yeah, I was wondering if some might have gone up to the IBM Gun Club there. I know they did a bioremediation cleanup up there.
Well, again, this work was done with department oversight 30 years ago in the modern world time frame, and it's very unlikely that they dug it up and brought it to the gun club. I think our folks who are watching would have caught them if they did that.
How about dirt they remove now?
Soil, well, if there's soil removed from the site now, then they would have to follow the same rules everybody else would have to follow. It would have to be properly characterized, manifested, and shipped in accordance with the law.
Well, I just took, because I live there on the site, that the dirt just goes out of there.
Well, what dirt from where, I guess is the question.
Well,
I mean,
it's all right around building 18, you know, they put a bus stop in there. They took that dirt, so I called you guys, and that was sitting down there where, by the river. Because I knew it only took.
Well, when you say you called, who did you talk to? Did you talk to the regional officer in Kirkwood? Did you talk to folks in Albany?
One of them, I finally got a hold of.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with their day-to-day operations at this plant.
Yeah, well, I agreed on it.
Well, is there any, do you have reasons to believe that this is illegal disposal of hazardous waste?
Well, they just dug up the road. All on North Street, they just dug up. All that dirt went somewhere.
Do you have reason to believe it's hazardous waste?
Yeah, it's the same dirt. It's been there forever.
Well, the same dirt as what?
You know what I'm saying?
I don't believe there's any contaminated soil in that area.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just wondering why you think it's hazardous waste, why you think it's contaminated. Just because it's in a road, then it's not, doesn't mean it's hazardous waste.
The tanks were bringing in the crap. They're bringing in stuff to mix with their stuff for the leaching. And there's chemicals there. And they're digging up that dirt now. I don't know what they're building over there, but I can't go over.
So you feel that there's illegal disposal of hazardous waste at IBM right now? That's what you think?
I think they're taking the soil away from there, and it just goes to wherever they want to dump it.
Okay, well, having heard that, I will bring that back and I'll talk to the Region 7 enforcement people about it.
Yeah, we can go over to my building right now, I can show you where it's at.
Yeah, I will suggest to you that there may be work being done at the plant which is perfectly legal and not managing hazardous waste. But I understand your concerns and I will bring them to the Region 7.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, when the stuff first came out, they said there would be no soil removed from the place without going to a special place. And now it's been 30 years, no, 70 years.
Is it no contaminated soil?
30 years.
I understand your concern and I'll talk to our folks at the regional office and I will.
Well, I hope they put it in your front yard, you know what I mean? Because I watched the whole parking lot of dirt go over to Barney and Dick's. You know, topsoil.
But if that's an OU7,
I found that.
Mark, if that's an OU7, they're telling us it's pretty much.
Well, OU7's over where the leachate's coming. We know they're gonna spill again.
That's from Franklin West.
Yeah, that's over this.
But
Is that there?
he's talking about the main OU1, OU2 part of the facility, so what you're talking about, right?
I'm talking building 18.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
I will pass your concerns on. Well, they redid North Street last year. All that dirt was on. Right now, they're taking right in between the buildings, where they take in the liquid that they use to treat the water for leaching. They bring tankers in there every day, and they're digging up in there.
Or in Franklin.
No, right in front of my building. Right on the edge of the building.
Any other questions?
Follow up to what I said earlier. I'm just wondering if somebody decides to do some construction, and maybe it's not malicious, but they decide to build across so that you don't have access to use the recovery well anymore. Are they required to notify and get permission on that
If
too?
there's any significant change in use of the site, and what that is defined in the regulation is, anything which could impede the remedial program for the site, they have to give us notice. So it's.
So yes.
required. So,
Yes.
they understand. But there will not be a specific requirement that anybody has to maintain that recovery well.
Yeah.
And frankly, if there is future groundwater management here, that well might not be in the right place.
Yeah.
But I understand your concern that it's already there by spending another $100,000 to put another recovery well.
Right.
I understand that. And we won't intentionally destroy it, so we'll keep an eye on this essentially.
Okay.
And the way the sites are regulated, if people are gonna build something, they gotta tell us.
All right, so this.
Thanks.
still on track to have OU1 report, same report, remedial action plan?
Well, the feasibility study is not yet done. The feasibility study won't be done until probably the end of 2018.
Okay.
So once the feasibility study is done, we still have to look at it, see what's in there. So it'll be a couple of years.
More than likely
probably
that, I think logically would be a little more intensive cleanup.
For OU1 and 2? Yes, probably. That is where the...
And the feasibility study is what you did with the one slide on the economics?
Yes, that's part of the feasibility study. And we'll look at different options and different alternatives for cleaning up.
Okay, thank you.
So you figure probably in about a year, we'll be back down here talking about that.
Well,
Something like that. Sometime probably.
I'm going to say more of a year and a half probably, because it's not going to be coming into the end of the year.
Yeah, so it's March now, so maybe in 15 months, we'll be back in this room probably talking about.
Well, you'll be back for the feasibility study, right? I mean, you have to go to our Italian restaurants and get a nice meal down here, right?
We're in.
Go to Energy's Pizza.
For OU1 and OU2, in a year and a half, it'll be that much more cleaned up by then too, right? They're currently doing the pump and treat, you said?
Yes, the pump and treat is still going on.
But there's nowhere near as advanced as what's happening with this western end. It's like the core part of the pool is still dirtier than that.
We got it surrounded.
Well, to me, it's encouraging that the groundwater remediation has actually progressed to the point where we can start to turn pumps off. And that's, to me, that's a small win here. You know, we can actually take one piece off the chessboard and okay, this was done, and start working on the center of the site and cap out. Is there any other questions about the site?
It's not O7 or the other?
Oh, but at this point,
Yeah, we're here.
I think we're done with OU7, so is there any other questions?
How is that leachate treatment going? Is monitoring of that showing that that's actually okay as far as what they discharge into the river?
That would be Huron's operations, and I don't look at their speedies permit. That's something that Division of
I
Water
don't know, but
monitors.
there's water people here in Kirkwood. Call the water people in Kirkwood and ask them, because you can get their speedies reporting data.
Speedies reports, right.
So if you want to get the actual speedies reporting data, call the Division of Water people in Kirkwood and see how to get hold of the data for that. I don't know the answer to that question.
All right, thanks.
My building's sinking from the remediation.
Your what?
My building's sinking
What makes you think the remediation's doing it?
because there's an injection well right there, and it wasn't doing it before they put that there.
So you believe that the injection of groundwater has...
I think from them sucking all the water out of the ground and turning on that injection well, it's dropped about 3 or 4 inches.
I don't want to say about that.
Can somebody come over and look at it?
No, I take your word for it. If you,
No, I'd like somebody to look at it before the building falls down.
Well, I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not wouldn't be very good advice for you. Has there been subsidence elsewhere in town associated with
Oh, there's
groundwater?
sinkholes all over.
Okay, well, all I have to say is I'm not familiar with that, and I don't think the department has any information to provide you on that.
So what do I do?
What do I do? If
No, what do I do? I'm asking you.
What would I do if I was you? I would hire a geotechnical engineer. I would hire a geotechnical engineer and determine what was the cause of why my building fell. And if it was groundwater recovery treatment, then I would take the logical course. Yeah, if you think somebody owes you money, there's an obvious way to deal with that.
They owe me money.
Well, if you think somebody has damage to you, there's an obvious way to deal with that.
Falling into the ground because of your remediation.
I would suggest that you talk to a competent geotechnical engineer who works for you to make that evaluation for you. That's what if I was in your shoes, that's
You
what
guys don't care what your remediation.
I'm not saying I don't care. It's just like that would be very unusual in the remedial program. I've been in the remedial program 32 years and I have never seen that. That would be very unusual. I'm not a geotechnical engineer, and I would suggest that if you think that your structure has been damaged by the recovery and protection of groundwater in this remedial program, I would suggest you hire a competent geotechnical engineer to confirm that. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
Can the DEC come and send an inspector to check for sinkholes? Do you have an inspector that can do that?
I'll tell you what, if there's sinkholes in town, show me.
So you're willing
Show
to?
me. Yeah, show me. Well, if I go to your house and see that your foundation is sunk, that's not a sinkhole, that's a foundation sunk. So I would just say, if there are truly sinkholes, understand, I'm a professional geologist, I know what that word means. So if you tell me there are sinkholes in town, I want to see them.
Okay.
I want to see them because I don't think you have sinkholes in town.
You can ask one of your guys, okay, that I called out about sinkholes that they fixed.
Well,
So there is sinkholes.
when you say sinkhole is a very specific meaning. So understand. I mean, they're.
Understand, I'm not lying.
Well, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm not saying you're lying. It's just that I would like to see a sinkhole in this glacial valley here. A sinkhole. I'd like to see
I
it.
can take you right over about 4 right now.
Well,
One's my building.
I find it interesting, you still have that big swath of dry area. I mean, we've been rehydrating the ground for how many years now? Rehydration?
I would have to pull out the aquifer maps to show why that is. It's probably related to the layering of the ground. That's why it's dry.
Because the purpose of rehydrating it was to kind of rinse the soil out again and then draw the chemicals back out again. So
I understand that, but it might be that there's the shape of the aquifer is such that the shallow aquifer simply is not saturated there.
How
It
deep
could
is
be,
that?
for example, it could be that the base of the aquifer came up there, and that the water's around it, and it's an island of lower permeability.
how deep is that dry area?
I don't know. Well, we would have to get the reports out. I don't know.
Good news.
Actually, one sinkhole we filled was
A sinkhole. Understand what a sinkhole is? Not like the sewer leak and the water running. That's not a sinkhole.
It's
All right, understand what a sinkhole is. Sinkholes happen in karst environments. And they say a karst.
What is a sinkhole? What is your definition?
Sinkhole is a karst term. That's a cave term, where the rock is dissolved away underneath. They happen in Florida, for example. Those are sinkholes. There are sinkholes up not too far from where I live.
What causes it?
Karst. Do you know the word karst means? Dissolution of the bedrock, cave formation. That's what sinkholes are.
I see.
the injection well.
Would his misconception being like a cone of compression rather than a sinkhole? Like,
All right, in alluvial deposits, such as we're happening here, long-term cone of depression will cause subsidence, but that subsidence happens aerially.
right, I was just trying
It
to.
doesn't cause one little spot to go down.
Right.
So you can get subsidence associated with long-term significant drawdown. Here, like for example, in the Central Valley of California, and some places out west where we have significant subsidence, we're not moving that amount of water here. We're not, for example, those associated with hundreds of feet of drawdown. Here we might have single digit to tens of feet of drawdown in our recovery wells. So, and it would be in the vicinity of the recovery well. And if there was subsidence, that would be aerial, and it wouldn't be in one spot. That's just,
47 feet from your largest recovery well.
okay. And is there a hole next to the recovery well?
We need.
Yes or no? Is there a, what you call a sinkhole next to the recovery well?
There's a sinkhole between the well and my building that's been filled twice.
Well, when you say a sinkhole, we'll talk after the meeting, all right?
Yeah, I love the show.
But I will say to you that the movement of water through the ground associated with this remedial system is very small compared to how much water was moving through the aquifer before. And the amount of drawdown associated with this system, combined with the relatively small amount of water that's moving through the system, means that the opportunity for subsidence associated with this is essentially zero. pumping the water out of the ground is not gonna make a sinkhole in Endicott. It just isn't. Now, there may be other processes at work where I live.
Well, there's old buildings there, is what they said.
Yeah, there's old buildings, and I will also say this, where I live, it's not uncommon to get big deep potholes associated with leaking water lines and leaking sewers. It's not uncommon at all, we see it all the time.
But
See it all the time.
how about an injection?
It's the same, the hydraulics are the same, whether it's in or out.
It wouldn't make it a sinkhole?
No, it makes the ground rise.
One last question. So the storm sewer, I think you mentioned in the previous meeting, I believe, or that there was some testing done along the storm sewer. And there's one area where the storm sewer doesn't actually exit to the surface. Did you speak to the testing?
I don't have that map with me, no. I know that there was a site.
Where was the storm sewer? North of the railroad tracks?
Right alongside, I believe it's between the tracks and Franklin, a little bit
Just put the site map.
towards the west side of OU7.
So are you concerned that groundwater was exiting via the storm sewer? Is that your issue?
I believe, it seems like I heard in the past that.
So the storm sewer was going down this way? Is that what you're talking about? Or did it come down through the boats?
There's an area where there's a
I
fence
know what you're
around
talking
it.
about. In OU1, between OU1 and 2, there, around in that area, I believe, one of the water mains broke, and actually, there's a large amount of water that helped flush it, and you can see the groundwater maps for OU1 and 2. It actually has pushed the plume slightly out, and it's now coming back into the site. Because it kind
Oh,
of.
so there was enhanced
It's
recharge.
a slight flushing of, sort of.
But that was, yeah.
Well, that wasn't really what I was referencing. I wasn't familiar with that, but in OU7, I thought that the storm sewer actually exited to the surface for a while. And there was an area to the south of Franklin, towards the west of OU7, and I believe there was a fence around it. I was just wondering if that area was tested for any contaminants.
I know that they did a supplemental remedial investigation of the sewers in 2006, perhaps, to look at if there's any contaminants in the sewer system that had migrated into the groundwater, and there was no evidence of that from that report.
Somebody write that down. Let's make sure we follow up on that.
Are you talking about that area that is on the south side of Franklin that has like a hollow? It's like almost like a pit.
It's like it's
groundwater.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Storm sewer data.
I could be wrong.
But
Are you familiar with that?
But your concern is that where storm sewer daylights, that there may have been root exposure essentially.
Right, yeah. My main concern was the storm sewer, because I know a lot of chemicals were dropped historically over the years through the storm sewer out to the river.
Right, so we'll follow up on that, we'll see, because you think that was looked at several years ago?
Yes, they did that. It was actually part of the consent order that they had to do a supplemental remedial investigation of the sewage.
Okay.
I think you're right on that.
So we'll follow up on that. And when I say we'll follow up, we will look at it, and we will, in our response to summary for the ROD, address how this remedy shows your concern. But when we say we'll look into all these things, we'll say, does it affect the remedy, yes or no? And we'll write down why that is.
I was previously concerned because the infrastructure is so old, like 100 years old, I was told. Some of it was replaced, I know.
Now, old infrastructure, like I said, like where I live in Village of Waterford, around Albany, old infrastructure will cause you to get very deep potholes. Oh yeah, oh, absolutely. Where stuff washes in the old sewer, that can cause you to get holes in the ground. They're not sinkholes.
I had a question too. 7 years ago, I used to work at the old tunnel that would run in front of Building 7 on the other side of the railroad tracks. There's an underground tunnel system that runs to the old IBM system, the old IBM center.
So tell me where it is. Left, right, up there?
To the left. Keep going, stop right there. It runs from right on that side, like in between the railroad track and the roadway. It would ran right alongside of the buildings. I did installation for underneath there.
When you say tunnel, subterranean?
Subterranean. Okay. It was about 12 to 20 feet down. About a big tunnel right and it was
designed.
Yeah. Were there any, when you guys did any testing there, were there any airborne pathogens discovered inside that tunnel? There was a lot of water runoff when I was working down there.
OU2.
Yeah, so that's not related to this remedy, but that I understand your concern, because in that part of the world, you do have vapor issues in that part of the world.
Yes.
So your question is, were there vapor samples in the, essentially the man-made tunnel of where people walk?
Yes.
On the west side of OU2?
Yep.
So, all right, we'll find out. Could you leave your name in the back?
I did.
I think they only sampled, if my memory serves me correctly, I think they only sampled in areas where workers would have been.
I just want to know that that's the right answer. They may not have tested there, but we'll look and see if they got it.
It would be in the DAE report. They sampled it.
Yeah.
I can't remember the buildings that they sampled.
Was it wet there anyway there?
There
Water seeping in there?
There were spots specifically made for water to run underneath us. Like there was plenty of little walkways where we had to walk over the water that was rushing underneath us. So there was no aquifer.
So you think there may have been groundwater right there?
Yeah. Oh, there was.
No, but I'm just trying to understand what the nature of the exposure. There may have been exposure there if there was contaminated groundwater in that tunnel.
I'm just looking for my own help.
Well, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look into it and we'll get back to you.
Are there any other questions?
This might be it's just a logistics question. For the 182,000, is that paid for by the state or is that IBM that pays for that? The cost of the room?
Typically, well, that's the cost. That's how much we think it'll cost, regardless who does it. In the remedial program, we always ask the remote responsible party if they would undertake the selected remedy. If they do, they do. If they don't, then the state has enforcement means, including using the Superfund. So there's been no discussion in with IBM as to whether or not they would implement the selected remedy. In fact, we haven't picked it yet.
Right.
But once the way it always works is that when we select remedy, then the responsible parties are notified what the remedy is, and they have the opportunity to implement it. If they don't, that's what the Superfund is for.
We'll make one.
We'll pay for it and IBM doesn't.
Right. Do you know about when that conversation might happen?
It's after, so there's a comment period, so everyone,
Right.
so once the comment period ends, we then select the remedy, we see if there's any changes, and then it.
Gotcha. After that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Just one comment for the health department.
Yeah.
I've been following this for many years, decade. And when the health study was done for downtown Endicott, I was a little disappointed for the study group that you guys didn't track down people that moved out of the area who had long-term exposures. And you included people that moved into the area that had short-term. So I feel that statistically it would have skewed the results a little bit. So just voicing my, I know it would have cost a lot of money to track everyone down, but
Totally understandable. I don't know if you guys have worked with Jim Bowers. He's in our Bureau of Environmental and Occupational and Epidemiology. He is the one, I haven't looked at those reports because that's not what I do, but he is within the health department. He has looked at the health study, the NIOSH study, and he can kind of explain more of why they did what they did and why things were left out. I have his contact information. I told him I was coming out here, so if you would like, I can give you his contact information.
well, they answered my questions years ago, and they just didn't want to spend the money to track folks down who had moved out of the area.
Yeah, that is a very unfortunate part of these types of studies. It is very difficult to follow through with people, but we'll take that, comment back, and I'm not sure, what more can be done at this point in time, but we'll certainly, raise that.
Is there concern that the study results are essentially a false negative? Is that what you're concerned?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't negative. They did find elevated cancers, heart issues.
Well, that's, a false negative. Do you think that if they included other people, that there may have been
It would have been a little more telling. Yeah, that's what I think.
I understand that.
Yeah.
This is not specifically about this, but overall, do you feel that funding from New York State for all of your organizations is adequate, and is it rising enough to meet the need?
You're asking us a question which is beyond our pay grade, sir.
Well,
You're asking me to stand in front of the media and say whether the department is adequately funded? All right, I mean, all right, everybody turn your cameras off. I know you. That could be career.
There have
limiting,
been
okay?
significant cutbacks.
So we're not going to get there. The specific question though for this site, if for some reason IBM chooses to take a different path, there are certainly available funds where the department will pick it up.
Okay.
If that, I don't foresee that. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's a common question people ask. Well, what if the PRB doesn't do the work? Answer for this: does the department have $182,000? Yeah, I think we can scrounge that up. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
You know,
Okay, and I
the governor has funded their media programs to a greater extent than that. But we're no to sit here and say whether or not I think TDC has enough people. Yeah, me and Jess are here to talk about their media program, not about department-wide political issues. That's not why we're here.
Does IBM still have a presence on the site? Are there still IBM workers?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
I guess the way I want to answer this question is, the way the cleanup is set up right now, you think it's hunky-dory?
Well, for this piece of the site,
Not on
Yes.
itself. I'm not.
for the rest of the site, there's still a lot of work yet to be done. We haven't even selected remedy yet for the orange area and the pink area, the peach area up there. So there's a lot more remedial work there. Are we satisfied with the remedial work so far? No, because we know there's more work to do up there. For the purple area to the left, yeah, we think we're done, but we're going to make sure by watching it. For the center part of the site, there is still remedial. We have not yet selected the final remedy, and we believe that further remediation very well may be required. So we don't think everything's hunky-dory. We think that we need to pay a lot of attention to this.
I just hear all the times people saying it's all cleaned up.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think there's very limited exposures to this site right now, right? I mean, we have people are drinking water, which is within the drinking water standard.
Well, we don't drink that groundwater.
Well, but first off, nobody's drinking this groundwater, but everybody has a clean source of water who lives in this part of the town. Everyone where vapor mitigation was appropriate has been offered or has gotten a system. Nobody's touching contaminated soil. No kids are going on the site and playing with bad dirt. So we think that where we are right now, as far as are we comfortable that we've managed the human health risks associated with the site? I think you guys would say yes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the exposures have been pretty much the best. We have long-term.
The ambient air.
Well, I don't think ambient air has ever been an issue here.
No,
has it?
IBM did a study back in 2004. It was, yep. They did a study over a year, and they tested the ambient air because of all the subslab depressurization systems. We tested it because we had community concerns that all those systems pumping out all that air would in turn impact the outdoor air. So there was a study done back in 2004, 2005, and it was determined that there was no discernible impacts to the outdoor air.
You don't think 14 years later it might be a good idea?
But, I mean,
It doesn't build up in air.
The levels of the groundwater plume have significantly been reduced.
Same with the vapor.
Underneath, yeah.
The vapor
Underneath the
levels.
area where the vapor systems are on, that plume is
All
shrunk
they've done is stuff
significantly.
up the water, out of the ground. So there is no groundwater for the vapor intrusion to come on.
Well, there is still
There is.
contaminated groundwater.
There is,
It's just a few feet further down.
Right.
But as they were just describing, the source of the air problem that you're concerned about has diminished in concentration greatly because the groundwater is a lot cleaner than it used to be.
I
So,
took a canister, but I don't know how good that was, and send it off, and it was so high in benzene there, which they say could have been car traffic.
yeah, is
Yeah.
benzene a
Yeah.
sort of concern?
benzene is not a contaminant of concern here. It definitely could be.
It doesn't cost much to do this test.
It has
Just
nothing
one
to
way.
do, no, it has nothing to
Making
do with
people feel
cost.
safe.
No, I mean, like Maureen was saying, it was done back in 2004 when, concentrations were a lot higher.
Really, the greatest exposure concern
That
for
was before
vapors
they
is
started pushing, they started.
There's no information that we have in ambient concern.
No information, we never tested the air after.
No, I think you're mistaken. I think,
My ventilation in the building.
excuse me, sir, it's not that there's no information, it's that they tested when things were at their worst.
No.
And if you would please let me finish. Tested when things were at its worst, when the concentration of groundwater were much higher than they are now, and that ambient air was not a concern. Now that the source is less, there's no reason to believe it would be a concern now, and it wasn't when the groundwater was dirtier.
We didn't test the air because we ramped up the pumps, tried to flush it all out.
I don't, this is primarily recovery revenue.
The injection wells, when they started the injection wells, because they sucked all the water out of the ground, they had to add water to the ground.
I understand that, but what makes you think that putting clean water back in the ground makes the ambient air dirty?
Got a dusty room, nothing's happened.
This isn't a dusty room, this is groundwater.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to ask you again, what makes you think that putting clean water in the ground causes the ambient air to get dirty?
Because it forces it.
Forces.
Before it wasn't moving. They ran those pumps up, they just kept racking them up.
Okay, so moving the groundwater through the ground causes ambient air problems. That's what your hypothesis is.
But
I would suggest that that's not a mechanism that
we would know if we were testing the air, if it raised it up or if it didn't raise it up. You just say, no, we ain't gonna do it.
When we
That makes me feel you're hiding something.
When we have done soil vapor intrusion investigations, where we have done them, we look at ambient air to be sure that the indoor air is not being influenced by what's in the outdoor air. And there was no indication that there was significant ambient air of concern. So we do have
Limits
data.
too, right? Limits two now?
Do you mean for
Ambient air.
what do you mean, what's the
Two's the exposure limit?
For TCE specifically, we have.
For ambient air
So
versus
62 in the air.
private indication.
Okay? They didn't rush down there to put a ventilation system in, okay? So I sucked that up, and plus they knew about it for a year, because they found out in Redfield, Colorado, that the vapor intrusion, because these cancer clusters, okay? Now, so they stick around for 2 years, and you want me to trust them? Why I sat there and sucked up 62. I had two buddies right around the corner from me. Mine was the highest, and theirs was the highest with the groundwater vapor intrusion. They didn't put the system in, they're both dead now.
In Mark's defense, I will say that at a prior DEC meeting, there was some question, it's unknown whether or not rehydrating the soil would increase the VOCs, the contaminants. The theory is kind of like you take a sponge, and you squeeze it, and then rehydrate the sponge, you're going to get more chemical soap, whatever.
Well, the hypothesis there would be this. The basic theory, the concentration of TCE that, or whatever solvent, right, vapor, you have saturated and unsaturated, and then the ambient air. What's in the soil vapor is a combination of that which comes off the unsaturated zone. It could be TCE in the unsaturated soil, which could put vapor in, or it could be coming off the groundwater, right? You drop the groundwater, then that which was on the soil that used to be the groundwater could now evaporate directly and come off the groundwater. And now if you bring the groundwater back up, your hypothesis is that the groundwater concentration would be higher because it would be coming off of the soil into the groundwater to the air, right?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, I think it was an Alex,
It's
prior DEC.
Yeah, I know, it used to work for me.
Okay,
I know.
they said that it was pumped so dry that it was unknown whether, once they rehydrated it, the dry
Well, it's whether or
soil
not-
would be only chemical, and once the water was put back in,
Yes.
would it actually increase the vapor?
Would it increase the groundwater concentrations such that it would cause increased vapor intrusion?
Did you guys find out?
And if you look, Jess showed you the graph earlier. There wasn't when we turned the pumps off, we were worried the concentrations were going to go up a lot, which happens at some sites. This site it didn't. But I understand it wasn't that bringing the water up would cause those soils to directly go into the air. It would be from the soil to the groundwater, to the air, to the people, right? And what we didn't see was that when we turned the pumps off and the water came back up, what we didn't see was that that groundwater became significantly more contaminated. We didn't see that. You saw the graphs.
Okay. Yeah.
But Alex was right. When he was talking about the shutdown test and he said, we don't know.
Right.
We didn't know until we did it. It was possible that when we turned the groundwater off, groundwater pumps off, two things could have happened. We could have gone up and there was contamination in the soil which became rehydrated, which was caused the groundwater to go up. The other thing that happens is when you're pumping, the groundwater is going through the ground very fast. And it only has a limited opportunity to interact with the soil. When you slow it down, you turn the pumps off, and the groundwater has a longer contact time with the soil, sometimes the concentrations go up because it's dissolution is time dependent. It takes time to dissolve off the soil, right? So if you slow the groundwater down and turn the pumps off, sometimes concentrations go up simply because the groundwater slows down. And we were looking for those phenomena when the shutdown test was done. Did the groundwater concentrations go up either because we slowed it down or because we allowed it back in contact with contaminated soil? It doesn't appear either one of those hypotheses has been proven.
Every site's probably different depending on geology. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. What it really boils down to is, I think, this is a pretty coarse aquifer. It doesn't have a high degree of fines in it. The TCE, the organic things, tend to absorb some finer material. So that if this had a lot of fines in it, and we turned the pumps off, the concentrations would have probably come up higher, because there still would have been more locked into those fines, and then you slow the water down, and it has an opportunity to dissolve. We often see, that's called rebound. We often see rebound where there's significant, another phrase we use is retardation, where all the chemicals get tied up in the soils. Here, the soils are relatively coarse. There's a relatively small fraction of the fines, the silts and clays that the organics like to stick to. So what happened here is, when we slowed the water down, it didn't make much difference. There wasn't that much left on the aquifer matrix.
I think Alex says like a lot of gravel and sand because it's a river valley. So.
Yeah, there's this big alluvial valley.
So that actually made it easier to clean up then, right?
Yes, in general, sand and gravel aquifers are much easier to clean up. Right. There are some aquifers in this state where we've done puppetry for 30 years. I'm working on one in Fort Edward right now, where the sandy part of the aquifer has gotten clean, and the part that's interbedded with silt and clay, it's not much better. Moreau, across the river is the same way. There's a lot of places in the state where we have those finer grained materials in the aquifer, and it's much more difficult to get down the standard.
It's harder to clean up the clay, but it's got an upside to it, in that the clay keeps contaminants from going down into the aquifer.
Yeah, but the point is, you have somewhat optimal conditions here with source control, an aggressive pumpetry for 30 years, and an aquifer matrix which is relatively sparse in silts and clays. The answer is most of the chemicals and most of the monitoring points have achieved our standards, which we don't, frankly, in our program, we don't see that often. How many times have you pumpetry to the standards? Not very often, right? No. It's very unusual. And we still may see over time the concentrations increase. And if they are, then we'll come back and we'll deal with whatever the source of that is. But this is an unusual case. This is where pumpetry has actually worked and has gotten down to almost achieve the standards throughout the whole portion of the site. And it's only because the conditions are optimal for it, frankly.
So we're jumping ahead here with this question. Let's throw one near ground zero where most of the chemicals remain. Is it OU1 and
OU1 and 2? Yeah.
Are there any? So what do you estimate they are going to consider? The bioremediation, thermal remediation?
Have we seen the FS work plan yet?
No, it hasn't.
No, so we don't have the detailed work plan approved yet for the FS.
But nothing's been excluded, or has it?
I don't think, no technologies have been excluded. No.
I know Alex said there's a concern with the with the thermal remediation because of the heat damaging some of the underground infrastructure in the building.
Well, the time to make that decision is in the feasibility study. We wouldn't screen it out before the study even starts. It could be, it very well may be that there are certain areas because of infrastructure, thermal would not be the way to go. In which case, there's other technologies that you can.
What about those buildings that have been empty for over a decade on North Street? Is there any talk, they were talking at one time about tearing them down?
I don't know what IBM's plans are for building demolition.
We don't know.
I don't know.
Julia, do you have access to the BAE indoor air study?
Is that the 2005 form? Yes.
What year did you say?
2005?
No, it was more recent than that. It was when BAE moved in.
Okay.
There was concern, well, and actually I think our group was part of it that raised the concern of the indoor air, with more employees going in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did BAE do the study? Did we?
BAE did the
Yes,
study.
we have worked with them and we are aware of their sampling.
Is there something that you can make public from that?
That's their study or their investigation, so it isn't for, public knowledge. So I don't know what they, we have talked to employees, we have tried to, interpret that and work with them for the soil vapor investigation on the whole to make sure it's consistent with the.
How does that relate to the cleanup?
Oh, the entire
Under the
site?
ground? Under the buildings?
Well, it's an overall evaluate. We
Right.
take the information and evaluate the potential for exposures and the need for, actions to be taken to address those. And that might include, remediation or mitigation to lower those, overall source removal and address the soil vapor concern.
Well, it seems like the public would want to know how how the building air is faring with all this. And if BAE won't divulge it, then we should maybe make it part of the study, feasibility study or however you...
Well, it is being looked at, and certainly I can tell you that the investigations for the buildings, we've certainly worked with IBM and BAE as needed to address any indoor air concerns, and things look pretty good. Act levels have been reduced where, where we can, and really within background or within the air guidelines. So,
Okay.
so overall, the indoor air, very favorable. Yeah.
Probably except for some hot spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've worked again with IBM and BAE to address those, and and work is continuing. So it's very favorable for the indoor air.
Have they submitted reports to the Department of Health?
Yes, we have, yep.
So the government is in possession of these reports?
Oh, yeah.
And there's
Well, BE, not necessarily. They do share it, but that's their own investigation, so.
But there are documents in the government's possession which contain factual information.
Yes.
So that should be in the library.
Well, you can draw your own conclusions. I just said the government is in possession of documents which contain factual information.
Well, and you guys share the documents.
How do you know what the next step is? You have another question?
Okay, so DOA, Department of Health, have you guys been involved in any studies or any testing for asbestos or any other contaminants other than chemicals in those buildings? They're pretty old.
That would, asbestos would be
Department of
Labor.
Yep.
But, yeah, we certainly look at the contaminants concern. We wouldn't dismiss that, but no, that's.
Department of
asbestos is
Labor.
not
The answer is no, not that you're aware of.
If there was ambient asbestos exposure outside the building, that would be within your purview, though, right?
No,
Department of Labor.
Department of Labor deals with asbestos, yeah.
Outside the building, it doesn't.
I will defer to my friends from the health department.
Yeah.
For private homes, somebody has asbestos shingles on the side of their house, you're involved though, right?
No, we would recommend the appropriate, that they take the appropriate action, to have a qualified person deal with that. But no, we don't address asbestos. That's primarily, well, in the work environment, it's Department of Labor and buildings, any buildings, Department of Labor oversees that primarily because of the overseeing the control of the removal and
Remediation.
how specialized it is. And
Well, our next door neighbor was, you guys, I thought, got involved, they had some lead paint on the exterior.
that would be
That-
the, yeah.
You
That would
guys
be
do
probably the
oversee that?
local health department, yeah.
Right.
Yes, certainly,
So you oversee lead but not asbestos?
right,
Yep.
In private homes?
right.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Well, the asbestos is with Department of Labor because they're the ones that,
Regulate.
They regulate and remove it and oversee the
worker safety.
the worker
system.
safety, yeah, that's primarily,
Which is different than NIOSH. Department of Labor is different than NIOSH.
Yes.
but yeah, we would look at any other environmental related contaminants that originated there or not, would be a concern, and we would address, we would, we have enough investigations here certainly to know what the contaminants of concern are. So we'll be talking about the volatile organics. It's not that we didn't look for these other things. This is what we know are the primary contaminants that we need to focus on. But we certainly, all the investigations we look at cover everything. And we narrow it down to what our main concerns are with.
Yeah, just remembering, I used to work up the Broome County Forum as a stagehand, electrician, and all their wiring was made out of asbestos, with their spotlights and the lighting, and they had a big curtain, a fire curtain made out of asbestos, and I complained, I was 20-something, I complained about it, they had to change all of them, it cost them thousands of dollars.
But good for you.
But I can't remember where I complained to, it must have been the Department of Labor back in 1980.
Probably.
Yeah.
Especially you were a worker there, so they know worker has health and safety complaint. It's natural for them to go to the labor department.
thank you for coming on down.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You're welcome. Jess, when's the comment period close?
March 26th.
March
So if you
26th.
folks think of any other things you'd like to tell us about this particular decision, the real decision for OU7, email, call, send us a letter between now and the 26th. That's when the comment period closes, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for doing a good job. Right, yeah.
Unless you.
Don't forget to come.
Someday you should stop over and show you around.
Could I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ground zero.
How long have you worked there?
Well, I worked there, I guess, 96 to 2001. They laid me off. My dad died the next month. We had 9/11, Dad died, and then IBM laid me off. Then it took them a year to get rid of the place, and that's when they came out with contamination. Now my property is worth.
And were you working for IBM?
Yes.
Okay.
They laid me off in 2001. They found out in October of 2001 in Redfield, Colorado, that vapor intrusion was coming up out of the ground. Everybody was trying to figure out where these cancer hotspots was causing it. And that's what they found out, the groundwater vapor intrusion. In October, they laid me off in November. And it took me a year to get rid of the property. Got it off, gave it away to EIT. if you're on campus.
Yeah. And because you still work in those buildings now, right?
Yeah, I worked in for 5 or 6 years.
Or I thought you still worked in them?
No, I live right on the site. My building's the only building that didn't knock down.
Yours is the only house they didn't knock down? Are you on the corner then of North?
Right in front of building 18. It's a gray building. It's right there. Their cleanup is behind my building. They pull their chemicals from the source through my building.
How long have you lived there?
I bought the building in 2000. Ever since. So I guess 18 years.
Well, I guess as far as the presentation tonight, what did you think so far of how the
This OU7 is like, they got 7 different things, I think it is. What they're trying to do is get the classification back to a 4, where they have to do nothing. Okay. Once they get a clean bill on each site, then it goes back to a class 4. That means nothing needs to be done.
A class 4?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that there's no action required. Class 2, there's action required.
Yeah, like
See, it was a 4, and when all this stuff came out of the groundwater, they made it back to a 3. And now they're trying to get it back to it. You don't want to
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, what is it like you walking away thinking or feeling tonight?
Here, I've been very disappointed in the state of New York for a long time. They should have moved me right off my place. Why should they make somebody live on top of a cancer cluster? And they know it's ground zero for 18 years. When IBM had enough money to buy the property, move off. And back then, Spitzer and the village lawyer were all saying property value protection plan. And when we left that meeting, we all thought that they were going to buy our houses and we were out of there. But it didn't happen that way. They just made us stay and shove and build and sniff the stuff and still come to meetings saying, yeah, someday in the near future it's going to get cleaned up. 100 years from now, who lives there?
Yeah.
Who could sell their property? And now I'm waiting for it to sink and fall in.
Have you tried to sell your home?
I've had a for sale sign on it. Yes.
Right now?
Not right now. There's reasons now. Because I got a hospital. I can't pay.
Well, is one last thing. Do you mind introducing yourself for me with your name and where you live?
My name's Mark Bacon. I live at 1412 North Street, Endicott. Groundwater, where they pull the plume through my building, just for jokes. I think I pissed them off in the beginning, so.
Oh, in the meeting tonight?
No. This has been going on. I'd like to take that guy over and show him the sinkholes that he denies, He can come over and see him. And see where building's sinking and take a picture and show him to people. And then you can show him saying that wouldn't happen. And when the DEC's already been over there, fixed it for him. That's who he worked for. That doesn't happen.
Could I actually take down your information and give you a call sometime?
Yep.
That'd be great. And I'll give you my, if you could write on here, this is probably
We come back next year to talk about OU1, OU2, because that's what feeds the main part of the plume, right? And it's only going to be OU1, OU2, right? There's not, right? So the next public meeting that'll be important to those people will be about a year from now or so.
I know, but how are you going to notify these people who live in the plume?
I would encourage them to sign up for the listserv. It's the easiest thing.
I know, but they don't even know to do that? They don't even know what's going on.
Well, when we started the listserv process, we sent a letter to every single person saying, sign up for the listserv.
But which person did you send it to when you say?
All the people who live in, all the people who were impacted, all the people who were on any mailing list that was ever developed for this site that we had.
Anybody that was on any mailing list.
But they have to be on a mailing list, that's the thing.
Well, how else would we know to mail them a letter? How can we post
Every
them?
house that has an address that
That's
has,
what we developed our mailing list from.
That's what it was developed for.
so you do have that mailing list of all the intrusions?
We used to, because we sent, but once, but we do, the department no longer sends letters. We use the listserv. That's just what we do. If you have a concern with that, you gotta go above me. Because
Well,
I
can we
don't
give you
know.
that concern to be put on the list? Because you had a list of concerns.
Yeah, so
Can
what
they
you're
please-
saying is that you want for every public meeting related to Endicott, that all the 400 plus people who have a vapor mitigation, just to make sure I get it right.
At least they're, yeah, right.
That they get a letter notifying them of DEC public meetings.
Right, like you did at one time.
Yep, yeah, correct, like we used to.
Like you used to.
Which we no longer do.
Right.
Because everybody got a letter that said, if you want notice, sign up for the listserv.
I understand, but do you know that there's a transient population here?
Well, I understand the
Homes-
concept of neighborhood turnover. I
Right,
understand.
neighborhood turnover, so the same people that were there, let's say 10 years ago, are no longer here.
Some of them aren't, yeah, some of them.
Or a good number of them are.
Some of them
From
aren't,
what
I don't know what the number is. I don't know what the fraction is, you don't either.
Well, we've heard that there was
Well, we heard
major
Right,
turnover.
well, maybe there was. So if you want, I will bring that concern.
Can you
home
bring
to our
that?
city. I absolutely will. No, it's a perfectly reasonable concern. We have a guy, his name is Larry Ennis, who manages our listserv essentially, and I'll say, Larry, people are concerned here that are in this, it's the 400 people who are on the Endicott.
Yeah.
So there's people who have told me that they're concerned that there's folks haven't heard about this meeting.
Right,
What can we do
most
about
of them don't hear
yeah,
about
and
it.
I'll say, what can we do about that? How do we
Right.
reach these people? We may or may not still have the mailing list, but we can go to Delorme Maps and download the addresses, right?
Right, the
So-
addresses, just get
right.
those addresses,
And I
to
don't-
whom it may concern, we
Right,
don't know the names.
And then the question is how many apartments? I don't know where we would easily find that, because a lot of them are two-family, right?
There might be more, there are multiple dwellings, maybe some of them,
Yeah,
yeah.
it might be two, upstairs, downstairs, or side by side. But anyway, that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why it was so difficult for us to develop mailing lists.
Right, right.
Because of all these concerns. So we just say to people all the time, sign up for the listserv. You find about anything in your county, you can find out about it. And
I know, but they have to be notified that there's a listserv. They have to have a computer usually. They have to access these things. Most
I
people
know.
can't do it.
most people can, but some people can't.
Some maybe will do it, but they're in the extreme minority usually from what I've seen. Going to these
From
things.
my experience in the remedial program, most people can, some people can't.
And what about also notifying the town of Endicott? So they might have a
Jess?
newsletter.
Jess, did the town get notified of this meeting?
Everybody's
Town and village?
Everybody's on the listserv.
I know, but are they in the listserv, do you know?
Yeah,
There's over 3,000 emails just to the county on listserv, but I will go through and I'll check that they're on there.
Yeah, see if the town is on there, because they can be notified, they could put it maybe in a monthly newsletter to notify their constituents. This is what's going to happen this month.
well, I mean, I understand your concerns, but understand, we did what we're told to do.
Right.
But I will see if we can change what we're told to do.
Right, right.
That's what I can do.
That's what you can do. Thank you, I appreciate it.
I have the same concern.
Yeah.
There was media notified. Obviously, they got here, I don't know why.
Well, I
But
would
they
dare
didn't-
say
they
because
didn't
the
show.
media is on the listserv.
Okay,
That would
but
probably
they didn't
be
have that. I don't know if they announced it on the TV, radio.
I looked in the Press and Sun Bulletin today, I did not see it.
No, it was not.
Yeah, I did not
It
see
was
it.
not. You know,
It used to be that in the old days, there was a meeting in Endicott, it was in the paper.
who paid for it?
I don't think anybody. I think the reporters were writing articles because they got people to read the paper. So I think that, they were. Things have kind of quieted down a bit, essentially, and it's no longer a hot topic in the media. So I think that's kind of got interest on a little bit. But I understand your concern, and I'll bring that home, and we'll see what we can do. Because this site's not going away. I mean, we're going to be coming back for years, and we might as well have, we're here doing a public meeting. We might as well have people come, right?
Because it could be going on for decades. What would
It
you
could.
say?
It
Right?
could.
Could be
Yeah,
going-
they've been at it for 30 years. And
30, so.
And I see at least 10 more years. I mean, I don't know. Hey, Jess, what are the concentrations running in the core of the OU3 plume now? 100? Total volatiles, 100 ppb?
Or
In the core of the plume?
probably close to 1,000 stuff.
It's going to be a while.
It's still up there.
Yeah, it's good. We'll be dealing with this plume for tens of years more. Yeah.
Tens of years,
Tens
right?
of years, yeah. Yeah, just look at the concentration.
Now, do you think it's high enough that people shouldn't even be living in this area?
No, not at all.
That they should
Not
maybe
at
be
all.
evacuated?
Nope, I don't think that at all. There's no exposure. As long as people have a vapor mitigation system on their house and they're not drinking the groundwater, it's not a problem. That doesn't mean we're going to ignore it. That doesn't mean we're going to let it go. We still want to clean the groundwater up. But we believe, and you heard the health department say it multiple times, at this site we believe the exposures have been mitigated. And now it's just a matter now of trying to get the environmental concentrations down.
But you're saying at this site, that specific section of the
Nope,
site?
I'm saying for the IBM Endicott site in total.
In total?
We believe that there is no unmitigated human health exposure. That's their position. Maureen, I just put words in your mouth and you can confirm if I was true or not. I said, for the IBM Endicott site in general, not just OU7, that we believe that all the human health exposures have been mitigated, whether it be drinking water or vapor exposure. And all the ones that you know of.
Maybe, but the vapor, there's still an ongoing sort of monitoring.
Yeah,
perhaps.
we still have to keep up the vapor system.
We have a good handle, a very good handle.
But as far as we know, people aren't being exposed at this site. As far as we know. I mean, there may be something we don't know about, but as
But
far
not
as
everybody took the vapor intrusion.
took the system.
No, not everybody did. So
All I would say is that if someone chooses to not make the system, I encourage them to take a system.
I will say IBM, whenever there's a new owner, IBM does reach out to the new owner and they're asked if they want a system or not, if they're within that.
So they can still get a system if they need it?
And they were very conservative going and offering systems well beyond what we, they couldn't sample each and every home. It was what we call blanket mitigation. To be conservative, they went ahead and offered these mitigation systems sample. Some homes, we knew that there was a need for mitigation, but certainly went above and beyond the area of the ground.
If you know somebody who lives in a house that they think should be mitigated, or you think should be mitigated, then we would say to them, call IBM and get a system tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Call them tomorrow. Yeah.
There's a hotline for them to call? Otherwise, they can call DEC?
Absolutely. Jess, your number's in the presentation or whatever.
Jess'
I'll give you my number if you want.
Yeah, we can look into it if the home is within the groundwater plume area.
Within the plume, yeah.
I mean, that's something. If there's an unmitigated house, we want people to get the mitigation, plain and simple. We want everybody to get it. We hope everybody will get it. We just think everybody will.
Now, the thing is, does it require electric?
IBM pays the bill, don't
They
they?
pay for the electric.
Oh, they
IBM
do?
pays the bill, yeah.
They do, okay, so they'll
Yeah,
pay.
we wouldn't compel the owner to pay for IBM's remedial.
There are a lot of buildings like that.
No,
Okay.
IBM pays the bill.
Yeah, they're very responsive in that regard.
If we can find a
Yeah, they look at the wattage of the pump and they say how much electricity is ours, and they subsidize it, right? Use it directly.
They subsidize it?
Yeah.
lot coming on.
You had a question?
Yeah, right, grab you for an interview.
For an interview?
Yeah.
So the extra players on the score here, do you feel maybe optimistic about the overall cleanup?
I am optimistic, and I think this can be used as an example for other cleanups. IBM has put a lot of money into it. And they have a lot of engineers involved. So I'm happy to see this as an example, and like the one speaker said tonight, the soil is more amenable to a cleanup, and I know that other places they have a hard time with it.
Do you think the way that this had been cleaned up translates to some more significant contaminated portions? If they were able to clean this much up, do you think they would be able to do that with some of the more contaminated parts?
Do you mean the contaminated area under the building?
Yeah, kind of the ground zero area where there's the most contamination. Seeing that they've made progress over here, do you think that could hopefully,
I would think there are solutions available. It's just a matter of how much it's going to cost.
All right, anything else?
That's good.